Good morning. Welcome to Opera Global in Focus today's webinar on modularization and flexibilization of learning, scaling and reskilling in the global context. Opera Global in Focus 2021 is a series of webinars and topics of global relevance for the higher education and research sector promoted by Opera Global and its partners. Please remember that the registration for the activities coming in the next weeks is still open at the Opera Global in Focus 2021 website. Bienvenidos al webinario Modularización y Flexibilización del Aprendizaje, Skilling y Reskilling en un contexto global.
Welcome to this seminar. My name is Maria Larrea. I'm coordinator of the University Internationalization Program of the Ministry of Education of Argentina, and it's a pleasure to be with you today in this summer morning in the South Hemisphere, talking about these priority issues of the South America, India, and European agenda. Yesterday, as part of in the framework of overall global in focus, we have been able to discuss cooperation, South-South-North cooperation, and also the different cooperation strategies that exist between Africa and Europe. Also, we have the need to set agendas between regions. Employability and the relationship between curricula and learning and the role of universities are key for this.
This webinar is developed in the framework of the DISEL project, which is conducted in the chapter India of OBRA. DISEL is an initiative led by the Asian Institute of Design from Bangalore, OBRA and the Royal Institute of Technology, KTH, from Sweden. And it focuses on specifically promoting the academic debate on skilling and reskilling and connecting top research institutions with the skilling agenda of India and Europe. Other major institutions participate in this project, such as Symbiosis International University, the Technical University of Berlin, Amrita University, and the Indian Institute of Technology at Madras. Before starting, please remember that overall Global in Focus will be integrated to the 2021 virtual conference on internationalization of higher education, organized by Symbiosis International University and the Association of Indian Universities in collaboration with the World Bank and Overall Global. This event will take place from the 5th to the 9th of April, and the registration is now open. You can find all the information regarding the conference in their website, which you can access from the Overall Global in Focus website. Your participation in the webinar will also be very important. So please remember to use the Q&A icon to post your questions. We will be monitoring the questions and we'll transfer them to the chair so he can make them to the panelists. We'll remind you that interpretation in English and Spanish is available, clicking in the interpretation icon below. L'interprétation aujourd'hui ne sera conduite qu'en espagnol et en anglais, donc nous nous excusons en avance. On invite nos collègues francophones, libanais peut-être, à choisir leur langue de préférence dans l'interprétation. So just to kick off the discussion today, and before giving the floor to our chair, I would like to bring to the table the report Upskilling for Shared Prosperity, which was launched last January by the World Economic Forum. And I would like to read two paragraphs to you. First, upskilling can be more transformational when it leads to developing attitudes and aspirations that will equip people with the skills to continually adapt to and take part in the changing world of work, resulting in healthier societies and supported by healthier economies. This includes acquiring relevant knowledge for new types of jobs through digital upskilling, for example, and developing transferable skills such as critical thinking, creativity, or even self-management. It is often these skills that make people more versatile, resilient, and adaptable, and more able to participate fully in the fourth industrial revolution economy, whether working for a business or starting one on their own. And the second paragraph I would like to share with you today is millions of people could be left behind if and when the industries they work in today are replaced by new sectors that require new skills. These skills mismatches not only have a severe human cost, They could result in falling incomes and a negative impact on government revenues and social safety net spending. So this leaves us with many questions regarding new roles for governments, new roles for institutions, in terms of relevance of teaching and learning. And the pandemic and the 2020 have been a year to make all the tests regarding all these questions. So to address these issues, we have today an extraordinary panel. We have Professor Emeritus Dr. Carl Jansson from the KTH in Sweden. We have Arnau Weiss from the Sant Joan de Déu Barcelona Children's Hospital in Spain. We have also Kate Kaysen from the USA, Dr. Pradhab Haridos from India, and Dr. Shafiq Mokbel from Lebanon. But before starting, we would like to conduct a short poll that you will see on your screen right now, just to set the engines going. I will read the questions and the options. We are asking you, what is your main motivation to attend this webinar? Is it because skilling or reskilling are becoming an important topic for your institution or your country? Is it because you want to learn how different contexts impact the relationship between learning and teaching, curricula design, competencies, and employability? Because you don't understand the relationship between skilling, upskilling, reskilling, or the differences between them? So we'll give you a few more seconds. And let's see the answers. So the great majority of you say that you want to learn more about how different contexts impact the relationship between learning and teaching, curricula design, competencies, and employability. Many of you, 32%, think skilling and reskilling are becoming an important topic for your institution or your country. And 12%, 13% say that today they do not understand the relationship between skilling, upskilling, reskilling, or the differences between them. We hope that after this webinar, you will be a little bit more aware on all these issues. So thank you very, very much. Now I will give the floor to our chair, Professor Emeritus Dr. Kalle Jansson. Good morning, Kalle. He's responsible for the Diesel project. He's professor in artificial intelligence at KTH in Sweden. He's a senior academic advisor for KTH internationalization in prioritized regions of India, Latin America. And he also represents KTH in several projects with mixed European and Indian partners. Good morning, Kalle, and the floor is all yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for the nice introduction. Dear audience, I'm honored to be chair at this webinar. I don't think the main reason for me being asked to have this task is my share at KTH. It's rather that probably that I, as you said, been representing my university both in Latin America and India, and therefore maybe have got a slightly wider conception of higher education systems. Also, as you mentioned, for a number of years, I worked together with colleagues in Europe and India on what we call the Diesel initiative together. And actually, this project came out of another project called Miles, where we also worked with a collaboration between European and Indian partners. That project were to look into the development on online education, both among European universities, but also among Indian universities. So the goal of the Diesel initiative is to study how sustainable models can be designed, which enables higher education institutions to contribute systematically to the needs for skilling and reskilling. So, and the motivation is, of course, as you already mentioned, also that many sectors of society and industry is currently changing very fast and faster and faster. especially in engineering, where electrification, digitalization, automation are at the forefront today. And this puts high pressure on securing the right competence of the staff of the organizations. Since we started 2 years ago with this work, we have experienced a strongly increased push for these topics. I mean, it was an interesting topic when we started, but we feel, especially with the reports you refer to and other of this kind, much stronger focus on this area now than 2 years ago. And in particular, also the discussion is starting regarding the university's role in these matters, because that was kind of neglected when we started, I feel. And it's a very wide area, skilling and reskilling. I mean, there are so many situations and so many levels of competence that we're going to look at. So let me start with some limitations for our focus. I mean, I believe all the levels are important, but we choose to focus on something. So we have focused on tertiary education, the tertiary education level. More specifically, you have graduates with bachelor, master, engineer education, which are also in principle professionally oriented. And as it turned out, it wasn't maybe an intention from the start, also have a bias towards engineering, because many of us who were engaged in this are people coming from engineering. But I believe what we will do is in general interesting for all kinds of at least professionally oriented educations. So by skilling, I will mean here, my meaning of that is the task of making new graduates employable within their basic field of expertise. They get a job actually in something that they were educated for. I mean, in many countries, individuals that have graduated recently and are looking for a job are not employable. I mean, it will differ from country to country, and I will think that is an interesting discussion, but I for sure know that in a country like India, it's very difficult to be employed as a new graduate. So the level of unemployment for new graduates is very high. So there is absolutely, in such a country, a great need for what I mean by skilling here. By reskilling, I mean the task of making existing personnel persistently attractive as employees. This means that you have been employed for a long time and you have a basic academic degree that was fine when you started. The development has somehow outdated your knowledge, which means that something have to happen, otherwise you probably will lose your job. And of course, this is also different from different countries, how these things function. So to handle this combined problem of relevant skills and low employability in the potential workforce, industry as well as academia has a joint challenge here, both of older and younger personnel. And this can be done now in many ways. I mean, there could be scenarios very clearly where universities does not play a role. So, I mean, industries can organize themselves in-house skilling and reskilling training programs. There are often used the term academy. I mean, so you can have a company name and then the academy, and this stands for this organization that takes care of this in-house. But of course, industries can also commission commercial actors to do this for them. And finally, individuals can themselves register for courses offered by commercial actors. So in these three scenarios, universities are not visible or are absent. But our angle is, of course, that we would like to see different scenarios, I mean, where universities still can have a role. I mean, this doesn't say that the other scenarios will not be there. I'm strongly believe all the commercial activities will be there. I'm more worried, and many with me, with how the universities come into play. So I mean, so then you can see there are three similar scenarios where the higher education institution could potentially adapt the last parts of the education in a more faster than we have done historically. So we could try to modify, sharpen the edge of our educations. But we can also be so, that which it happened in many countries, that industries actually commission not another commercial actor, but the higher education institutions. And we have a number of those cases that I know of that is successful. And also individuals could register for courses that is provided by us without registering for a full basic study program. So obviously there are two kind of futures here, one where universities has a place in this realm and one where we don't. And I can see there are two main issues. One is the combination, of course, of these scenarios, which will provide the highest quality in the long run. I think private actors, commercial actors can do a great job, but at least in my country, the problem we have that it's difficult to have a quality systems that ensures that all these actors come up to some quality level. Universities, I believe, if they engage in this, will have a decent quality in many cases. So therefore, I think universities can contribute to keeping up the quality level. I also think it's very important personally for the university to look into this, because things change. Historically, we could have the business model we had for 100 years, but now we need to look into a scenario where lifelong learning takes a bigger role than it used to do historically. So this means if we as an organization still want to have an important role, we cannot just neglect this new scenarios that we earlier had a very marginal impact on. Actually, so personally, I believe we should engage. That's my view. It's obviously not so that this is a consensus view among all universities and all faculty. My view is for the above reasons, we should engage. So the question is what the obstacles are, and I can see two obstacles for us. One obstacle is that the primary duty of many universities like mine is research, number one, in our case, PhD education second, and basic higher education third. And then there is some time over, but not much, to do other things. And among other things comes our contribution to commissioned education and continued lifelong learning. So the other problem I can see is our turnaround time for changes are too long for the fast-moving society around us, which means that it's difficult to us to be fast enough to offer what is asked for. Also, we have many universities very strict boundaries between different kinds of programs, different kinds of courses, and so on. So even if the content actually is the same, because they are classified as this or that, things cannot be reused across these program boundaries. So both these state of affairs calls for pretty large system changes. And this is, if we want to go into this, we need to tackle this systems changes. Finally, I just want to emphasize as a background for the discussion that I do not believe there are general solutions here. I think it's very important that we have collaboration internally in countries, but also internationally, and that we share experiences. But I still think that the solutions have to be tailored to each context. So one solution in Sweden is probably not really useful in a part of India, and so on. So everything have to be tailored, but collaboration can make us more experienced and share our experience. So that was my introduction. I haven't talked a lot of exact details of the detailed project, but I thought it was more important to get some general background that we can have for the discussion. I'm happy to share more detailed information to any of you who are more in detail interested in what we do in this diesel approach. So thank you for that. And by that, I think we should just continue in the interest of time. We have a very tight schedule. So I think the next part now is that we will listen to one good example of how this kind of modules for skilling and reskilling can be done. So therefore, I want to introduce Dr. Arnaud Vols. He's the co-director of the Expert3D postgraduate program at a hospital in Spain. It's called the San Juan de Dios Barcelona Children's Hospital. He has a long experience of this kind of development, and I've been lucky enough to listen to presentations of this project before. So I'm sure, and I hope many of you will appreciate it. So Arnaud.
Thank you very much.
Please go on.
Thank you very much, and welcome everybody. I'm very glad to be here today with you, explaining our experience in the project Expert3D. This project that I am co-leading with Dr. Josep Munuera, Head of Radiology of San Juan de Déu. And I think the topic is very relevant and tackles directly the need that we found some years ago. So I'm going to start in the motivation and the need that created this project. And in the next 10 minutes, I will try to explain our proposal for a solution. So basically, and as you know, and have been said very nicely, that the world is changing very fast. New technologies are arriving. And in our case, in the case of medicine, new technologies, but also skills are merging between technology, specialties, but also physicians and medical specialties. That's how imaging was done some time ago, starting by the patient need and the clinical image acquisition, and then with a report. But today we have radiological evaluation with improved technical acquisition systems. Also then enters into work radiologists, physicians, physicists, and sometimes also engineers to take other new products like 3D imaging, AI that helps on doing a diagnosis, or even radiomics to take out some quantification of the image to help on diagnosis. So that was the initial scenario in which we found. In our pediatric hospital, we created 5 years ago a unit for 3D planning with advanced techniques. And one of the problems that we found was that in the standard graduate studies, there was no solution, no proposal for reskilling or upskilling to different specialties and working together, helping also on how to collaborate between specialties and backgrounds like engineers, radiologists, physicists, or physicians, that at the end, they have the same objective, but they talk different languages. So set and seen that there was no solutions, we decided to go and move forward to create our own solution. But that's something that it's impacting not only medicine, not only radiology, but many specialties. And for example, in Forbes publication in 2018, we see how they said that in the following years, the reconstructive surgery 3D printing specialist will be a newcomer in the world of medicine. Also, voice assistant healthcare content specialist and other types of specialists that now we cannot see them on the hospitals yet, but that will come, and we advance this arrival. Also, that new skills will be needed for healthcare professionals. Like the second most important for health IT analytics in June 2018 was developing the next generation of radiology tools. And soon, a few years ago, we've seen how the American Radiological Society said or recommended that radiologists may know some about artificial intelligence and informatics, as they will keep working more and more with this type of tools. So we are in a moment of radical change in the way we see medicine. And our solution and proposed solution for that was a blended course, a postgraduate course accredited by the University Polytechnic of Catalonia, a technical university here in Spain, and together with the clinical association and the society, in which we divided the course in 8 weeks with 5 models, starting by the clinical need, looking also on the legal and ethical aspects, but then moving to set a base for all the professionals coming into the course, as we had 3 different types of students. We had engineers at some point, we had also radiologists, and we focus also on surgeons and other medical specialties. So we needed a model to set a same base in anatomy and radiology techniques. Then focusing on the clinical need, we moved to the 3D printing module and bioprinting, and then to how we use artificial intelligence and apply it for post-processing and classification of images and developing of these type of solutions that will help physicians at the first side. And finally, also how we can take out quantitative data from imaging to help on diagnosis, what it's called radiomics. So this course, as I said, it's an 8 weeks transversal blended training program with 6 weeks online, very interactive, 1 week face-to-face with practical classes in a hospital of reference, and 1 week to complete the final project. As I pointed out before, the targeted learners are not only clinicians, and that's one of the innovations in this project, but also surgeons, radiologists, and image technicians, bioengineers, bioinformaticians. And here is also a learning curve on that, on new skills, on how to work together different specialties. So far, we've done 5 different editions in 2 hospitals. The first year in 2019, it's a quite new course. In Spain, in Sant Joan de Déu, in our hospital in Barcelona, also in Coimbra Hospital in Portugal. Then Germany, Heidelberg University entered as a partner, Unina in Italy, in Naples, and also the University of Riga and the General Hospital entered as a partner, having also an edition there in Latvia. And what makes it unique and different? So we have 32 experienced lecturers, and here it's a new change on the way this is done. If we want to teach what will be needed and needs-driven, we need people that are working on the first side with all those technologies. So that's why we mix, again, radiologists, engineers, and surgeons that are now working on this type of techniques and technologies in their daily day. We use professional software that we use in the hospital, and we start by clinical needs from our case or other examples to finish the last day of the course with a complete planning with a real case, simulated case, so that they can transfer after the course directly all these skills to their daily day. As I said, this course, it's a mix of different entities. From the private sector, we have Philips, a healthcare company. Also, we have 4 different hospitals, but also we have the technical universities from Polytechnica Catalonia, and also the Institute for Chemistry Sciences, also in Barcelona, that are helping on the area of bioprinting. So all this project was done thanks to the funding of EIT Health, that you may know, which is a public-private entity that helps fund different projects in the case of innovation projects, acceleration of startups, but also campus projects, let's say, educational programs like ours. And we've been funded with this European fund for 3 years now, for these 5 first editions. And what are the outcomes so far? So we've trained 120 students from more than 20 nationalities coming to the course, to the 5 editions that we've done. And we see how we have a third of surgeons coming in, a third of radiologists or image technicians, and a third of engineers or IT specialists wanting to work together with this kind of skills. And we've seen good examples of how they afterwards transfer this in their countries. For example, we have a case in Uruguay in which months after the course, they created their own 3D planning unit, starting to do some cases. But also in Portugal, they did the first cases and publications for the hospital in 3D planning of an oncologic case. So that's one of the things we are more proud of, how transferable these new skills and this reskilling that we've been working on, it's working and we see the results. So that's the example of our course, a reskilling and upskilling course that was born from a need that we found in a gap in between the classical studies of medicine, engineering, and the new needs for new technological skills, but also new ways of interaction between different specialties that we are sure that in a near future, and we think that already it's a reality, will work together in the front of the hospitals. So thank you very much. And again, very happy to be here with you today, explaining our case.
Thank you very much. I have two quick questions, actually. So what do you do with a group of students, let's say a surgeon that has absolutely no knowledge in informatics or computer science? I mean, it's pretty advanced topics you teach. So, I mean, I fully understand that many of the criteria is no problem, but with those who have extremely weak background in informatics, how do you handle that category?
Good. So, important question. In that case, what we do is we have these first 6 weeks of online training in which we train with actual examples. First, there's a base in theory of the topic, and then we start to accompany with real cases in each of the steps so that they can do practices and practice with real cases. And finally, the final project, it's done together in groups between engineers, radiologists, and surgeons, so that they can work and help ones to the others to develop these skills. The objective and develop the final project. So the objective at the end is that surgeons, in that case, or radiologists can understand what's artificial intelligence by doing it and trying to take out all these booths that it could be around it and understand what really it is. And at the end, what we see is that that's the best we can give them. There's some that are more advanced and that they start to do the first algorithms, and others that they bring in the clinical needs and the clinical ideas, and then the engineer in the group is the one that develops the final project.
Okay, thank you. My second question is about how the students join. I got the feeling, but I don't know, whether they join individually, just one-on-one. They hear about that, they find it interesting, so they register for the course. Or if there is some more systematic, so one part of a radiologist division decides, oh, maybe we should send our people to this course. I mean, what's the form at the present moment for joining?
Yeah, good. So the first year was individuals that came into the course because they found it interesting by the marketing and communication and outreach activities that we did. But after the first year, what we found is that we created certain relations with universities and hospitals, and they are the ones also with radiological and scientific societies, and they are the ones that are bringing in recommended students from the different backgrounds. So now I would say that we changed from a more individual entering in the course to a more systematic. Although I would say that there's a huge part that still comes because they individually have the motivation to get into the course.
Okay. Thank you very much again.
Thank you. And just to say that we have also opened inscriptions for this course in this next year. So anyone that is interested, you can enter the website or write us. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so thank you very much. And I guess we now will go into the panel discussion. there was a short introduction of the panelists, but I like to maybe repeat that again. So we have 3 panelists, and the first is Kate Cassin from something called Volta Learning in US. And actually, Dr. Cassin is a renowned expert in competence-based learning since a very long time. And also, I am not familiar with Volta Learning as such, but it seems to me from what I looked up, that it's a company that really has a very clear profile on the topic today, looking into how the outcome of post-secondary education can be transformed and augmented to fit this purpose. So welcome, Kate. Our second panelist is Pratap Haridas, who is a professor at Indian Institute of Technology in Madras in Department of Metallurgical and Materials Engineering. But more specifically, he's also one of the program directors of NPTEL that was mentioned. And NPTEL is one of the world's largest higher technical education portals. And I think from a European perspective, I highly admire the setup of this. And actually, I and a colleague have actually set up one course each in this network, and that was a very interesting experience. So welcome, Pratap. And finally, we have Professor Shafiq Mokbel from University of Balaman in Lebanon. And Professor Mokbel had led several EU projects focused on higher education, and is currently also was since many years recruited as a higher education reform expert for several of the EU programs, Tempus, Erasmus+, and so on. So Professor Mokbel, very welcome to the panel. So I assume we start, because here always our time is limited. So what we would like to start with is a general question to all panelists. And the instruction is that we for that part, we have 5 minutes per person. And the general question here is from your countries or context perspective, more generally, how do you view the need or balance between when we talk about skilling, reskilling in your area? And of course, you don't have to limit yourself to the limitations I took up. I mean, so that may be so in your context. Other parts of skilling, the one mentioned in the very first introduction here about the general skills, soft skills can be important. So please, each one of you, give your view on how the situation is in your country and in your situation. So maybe we should start, ladies first. Kate, you want to comment on this question?
Thank you very much. Good morning, bonjour, buenos dias. So I wanted to give a little bit of context first before I launch into this very important question. Just to provide some background on the higher education system in the United States. So the first thing to know is that there is no higher education system in the United States. There is no Ministry of Education or equivalent. So there's enormous autonomy, variability, missions are very different, the demographics are different among institutions, the purpose, how selective they are, the cost, the funding mechanism. So there are private, not-for-profit, right? You might think Harvard, MIT, but also very, very small faith-based church-associated schools you've never heard of, I guarantee. Most what are called historically Black colleges and universities. Then there are public institutions, the big state universities you've heard of, but also what are called regionals, which are very much not selective and tend to draw people from a specific area. And then we have private and for-profit. So the University of Phoenix, for instance, career colleges. And the reason why I say all of this is that when we think of the university in the United States, we tend to think of the place where we went or we would like our children to go. And that is not actually the majority of most students in the US. In fact, only 14% of US college students, first degree students, are what we think of. They're 18 to 22, living on campus, studying full time. So that means that the job of preparing people for skilling, right? Skilling people, preparing them for their first work is not necessarily being done by universities. And in fact, there's what we sometimes call higher education exceptionalism. You know, the very best universities in the United States, by and large, do not see their job as preparing people for the workforce. In fact, they're proud of this, right? So that means, and I'm leaving aside engineering, clinical areas, right, specifically, but talking about sociology majors and poor benighted people like myself, English majors. And so that means that that job is being done by community and technical colleges, which offer both degrees and non-degrees, often contract with local employers, clinical programs, obviously, technical programs, welding, advanced manufacturing, education, teacher preparation, career colleges, which can be a little on the scuzzy side. They're a little, sometimes not, a little dubious, right? Military training actually is a large source of skilling in the US. Now we have boot camps, which focus on coding very quickly, often for people who are already graduates of a university. The result of this whole mess is that basically employers say college graduates in the US, only 11% are prepared for the workforce, right? So oddly, about 85% of provosts, high administrators in universities think they're doing a good job of preparing their students. So clearly a little bit of a mismatch there. But all of this is starting to change. I can maybe go back to that. Would that be better to go back to to give other people a chance? But there are some very exciting new models that are emerging. Perhaps I'll talk a little more about that now that I've shown you what a confusing picture this is in the US.
Okay, yeah, we've come back. We have a second round, so thank you very much. We are convinced now of the complexity of the US system. Maybe we go, Pratap, would you like to comment on the Indian context? Not so simple either, I assume.
Sure, Kelly. Thanks everyone and welcome to this webinar. Yes, the Indian context has been quite complex in terms of the education that's available and the large number of people who seek this education. There are very small numbers of highly sought after government funded institutes for higher education in India, and usually to get into them is an extremely competitive process. So you're normally looking at about something like 100,000 students applying to a university of that nature, and about 1% of them, 1,000 or so, getting admission. So unfortunately, just because, and this is primarily because of lack of facilities in that scale. And so the focus actually often is on how you will eliminate 99,000 applicants. That becomes the primary focus, because everybody has an application and everybody has some score to send you. And there is usually a very difficult entrance examination, which is there in the Indian scenario for most highly sought after educational institutions. And the primary purpose of those examinations is to eliminate a huge number of students, which is actually very unfortunate, because at its core, the philosophy of education is to be inclusive, but that's not exactly what we are accomplishing when we do this. Although we do get highly capable students into these institutes. So the government also has been looking at it from an even broader perspective. We have a gross enrollment ratio of about 26%. It was actually a lot lower even about 10 years ago. I think 10, 15 years ago, it was maybe only about 15%. They have managed to raise it to about 26%. And there is a lot of interest to raise this to about 50%. That again, in the Indian scenario, means you have to create about several tens of millions of seats for the students to be able to apply, and correspondingly several million highly trained instructors and teachers available. So this is not going to be something that can happen in short order, and therefore the government has actually actively encouraged the institutes of high repute in the nation to see if they can come up with innovative ways to reach out to large numbers of people with a lot of freedom to us to figure out how to do it. And so in fact, one of the programs I work on, which is this NPTEL, which is this national program on technology enhanced learning, is something that we have, is a program where we have actually looked at this. We have tried to see if we can find ways to reach very large audiences. But our focus is also that we have this concern that we don't want to reduce the quality of this educational process. So we have innovated a lot in this area. We've tried various approaches, and we have currently a package of maybe 3 levels of approaches. I will just briefly mention them here, and then if necessary, we can discuss them in greater detail later. We have individual courses, and we usually offer about 400 to 500 of them every semester, which students across the nation can take. And these are offered by faculty at the best institutes of India, and it is for free. In fact, students anywhere in the world can take these courses. It's free. We even run an exam for a very nominal fee, and there are individual course certificates that become available through this process. We also have groups of courses, which is something like a minor stream, which we again, where they can build this up through their individual courses. And finally, very recently, we have even started an online degree where the medium of instruction is online, but the assessment is all in person, so that the rigor of the process is not diluted in any manner, and the student is actually very capable and is able to prove that he or she is very capable in the area that they have been trained. So we have tried these 3 different things. A significant degree of success we find based on the feedback we have received from a lot of the students who use these 3 approaches that we are offering them. So maybe I will halt here, and later, if there is further discussion, I can add to this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So Professor Mokbel, would you like to comment on the situation in Lebanon with regard to these matters?
Okay, thank you.
Or in your immediate context.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Professor Khalid. Situation in Lebanon is also very complex. Although it's a very small, tiny country, but really very complex, with 50 universities coming from different horizons, very autonomous, extremely autonomous. So nearly every university is totally independent, nearly, I must say. However, very competitive. So even before quality systems have been created, the competition that exists within the country makes it a very efficient system in terms of pushing forward, etc. To go back to our issue today, which is skills and reskilling and upskilling. Few years ago, actually, just 1 year probably before the COVID pandemic, we started thinking about really the skills in the country, mainly in the sense of this Erasmus Plus, this European Erasmus Plus here group, saying, what about the skills? And we moved a little bit towards the orders, the professional orders or association, because in there has been a feeling, because the market for our graduates are not really the local market, but the whole regional and sometimes international. It's very known that Lebanese are nearly, we were discussing with Marina at the beginning that Lebanese are nearly everywhere. And we had the feeling that, especially the Lebanese, for example, engineers that are in the region, in the Gulf region, start to get to mid-career and having problem of being competitive. So there has been an action, and actually we started collecting what are the skills necessary for a small country where we don't have resources in order to build a prospect for the skills in Lebanon. But we based on the ESCO, the European Skills and Competence Qualification, I have done a small survey in order to decide to draw a little bit the skills that should be in our graduates with the so it's a little bit original approach with tight cooperation with the association, professional associations, Order of Engineers, etc. And this is a first step. And we moved forward with the pandemic to another step, to a further step, together with the professional association, in order to decide. We have built a platform, a learning platform, and several conferences. One we called E-Engineering versus E-Engineers. It happened, we scheduled it on the 4th of August, and we got the blast. So it was just when we started, then we got the blast, and this conference stopped, but the action is still going on. We wanted to try with the engineers first to create some courses at the national level that will promote new skills, mainly skills related to digital transformation. So we have in the different engineering sectors identified tools and how they work, etc., dedicated for the mid-career, actually. From the university level, I think it's like it has been said, if we say the World Economic Forum, the latest report, actually the big enterprise, and Professor Kali, you just mentioned at the beginning, if you take the report and you take the profiles of the different countries, they prefer in the different countries in these surveys, the employers, the companies prefer to have internal learning. And second choice, online learning. The latest choice of the employers is always the educational system. And there is here a niche where we should start thinking why. It's not only because universities are very traditional in the way, but there are constraints most probably of time, of resources necessary in order to set up short courses, short programs that would be beneficial and attractive for the employers in the different countries. So things are moving in this direction. I will not take a lot of time, but we can discuss further if the time allows. Okay.
Thank you. Just a follow-up question. Maybe I missed it but I mean, generally, when a graduate comes out from any of these universities, or the ones you described, I mean, we heard from US and India that a large share of the who come out are not employable. How is the situation? In Sweden, most of the students who come out from a university is employable, actually, at this moment. But how is it in Lebanon? Are the most people employable apart from special groups in the country?
A few years ago, in the country, we don't have enough job offers for all the graduates. Okay. But as I said, Lebanese are used to travel. So most of our graduates will travel around the region and around the world. So this is very, it is very traditional in Lebanon. But since a few years ago, since a couple of years, the situation deteriorates drastically. So today we have a big crisis. It's very known. But actually, we started thinking about all these issues of skills and how to upskill the whole system before the crisis exploded. Because we would like that our engineers that are in mid-career and even young engineers or professionals, when they go to the global market, to be competitive. So the perspective was like this.
Okay, thank you. So I get we take a second round, and I mean, some of you have already touched this, but I mean, you're free to take up whatever you like. But I would be glad if you could talk a little about potential role play, the different actors. I mean, if we like to see a change, what would the actors be? How would the balance of commercial and university actors be in this new game, so to say? So please, Kate, if you like to continue.
Yes, thank you. Actually, I see now that many of the same things are happening across the globe, which is encouraging. I just wanted to distinguish between employed and employable. I'd say over half of all college graduates are employed, but not necessarily in a job that requires that degree. Right?
Okay,
So,
okay.
And a lot of the issues, though they certainly fare better in the economy than people without college degrees, right? So that is very clear. But they're also often very much in debt, which is a whole other subject. So one of the things that's so interesting here is that the use of technology and how that has changed the landscape. I think at first the idea was technology for access, right? So that we were all sequestered at home or live in a rural area or whatever, you could get access to university and also often for free, the MOOCs that were very popular a few years ago. But there's increasing understanding that technology may be able to do things that actually the traditional professor-focused model can't, right? So that technology can offer opportunities for practice, for team work. I mean, there are many things that online can do or technology can do that actually people can't do. So not only the convenience and flexibility. Out of this idea has grown micro-credentials, sometimes called badges, which sounds a little silly, that are very specific market-related skills, right? It could be IT, it could be something fairly specialized. And this whole notion of competency-based, which is the idea really that the focus is not on the course you took, but what you can do with what you know, which is really a conceptual shift that's important. This is especially important because HR departments in business tend to think in terms of competencies, right? No one ever says, I want to hire Kate, she got a B+ in sociology. It doesn't, right? They want to know what you can do for them. And so that whole question of making transparent what it is that a university graduate knows and can do in a way that employers can understand is very important. There's also interest in stacking. In other words, right now, if you are at a traditional university in the US and you have 119 credits, you have nothing, right? If you have 120 credits, you have a degree, but 119, nothing except for student debt. So there's interest in dividing up the degree so that it has meaningful pieces that build on each other. And of course, it is also true that once you have a degree, you can build on it, right? The technology when I was going to university was typewriter, right? I mean, that the idea that would be enough for the rest of my life is of course silly. The same thing with what I learned there, right? Some of it continues to be useful, but some not so much. And then we have models in which, like Coursera, for instance, which probably many of you are familiar with, working with, let's say, AT&T, a communications company, and Georgia Tech, right? So you're seeing a lot of these sort of triangulated models that are partly born of the fact that universities don't move very quickly on their own, right? Sometimes it can take a couple of years to create a new program, by which time it's obsolete, right? So it's understood that taking a smaller part and having it be validated and in some cases driven by an employer is going to result in more market-ready graduates. So let me stop there, and I want to hear about the rest of the world.
Can I follow up? A short follow-up?
Yes.
I mean, what's your view? If a student took a whole bunch of Coursera courses individually without no coaching, just and put them a portfolio, and then go to a company and say, hi, here's my portfolio, of course, and I have no degree. I've never been anywhere. I've just took. What do you believe that has, what kind of status would that have currently among
that would have no
employers?
None. It would have no status, but
Okay.
But many of those are now offering, that's where I guess the competency idea is so important, because the focus is on demonstrating what you can do, right? So that somebody who can show a portfolio or who has done work in IT, right?
Yeah.
In IT is one of the few areas where they're really still, people don't care that much whether you have a degree. They really care what you can do.
More a portfolio of results rather than portfolio of courses, it seems.
Yes, the course is not a meaningful unit of learning, right? It's an administrative unit, right? And so that's one of the issues, is that when you show someone a transcript of the courses you've taken, there's no real information being provided, right? Even the grades are only relevant to each other, right? If I got a B+, it tells me that I did better than some people and worse than some other people in that particular course. But it has no meaning outside the context of that particular institution.
Thank you. Pratap, maybe you can comment a little more about the role play too. What one can foresee as new role plays among Indian actors.
Sure. Great. That was very informative on how things are in the US with online education, and some similar aspects here. I mean, we do have, first of all, as I mentioned, we come under the ministry here. So unlike maybe the American model, we do have a distinct Ministry of Education presence. It used to be the Ministry for Human Resource Development till very recently, and it has been rechristened as a Ministry of Education. And so they are they set the policy for the nation in terms of what new things institutes can do. Of course, they take a lot of input from us. So many of the things that, say, for example, at IIT Madras, we have done on our own the last several years, is now part of what is called the National Education Policy, which they released just last year. In 2020, it was released. And many of the things that we're currently doing, which is having this online reach to students, is actively encouraged there. It's not just actively encouraged there. We have now an official policy that students can take 20% of their credit through online courses. In fact, this year they have raised it to 40%, given all the pandemic constraints that are there, that they can take up to 40% of their credit online. This poses, I mean, a lot of opportunity as well as challenges. The opportunity is that students can now access very high quality courses from across the nation, because we are also providing those courses. It's not, excuse me. In this case, our process has sort of organically grown. We had not really thought of this pandemic, because all of this online education initiative that we have been doing has occurred over the last, I would say, 18 years, of which the certification kind of thing that I'm talking about has happened in the last 6-7 years. So we had actually been organically doing it. So we have really grown in terms of what we can do, how we are doing it, how we are controlling quality, and so on. And now when the government needs it, in a sense, we are ready. So we are able to give them something that can handle massive numbers, still maintain quality, and so on. So the acceptability. So when we talk in terms of the different actors in the process, from the government side, from the university side, there's a very high degree of acceptability of what we are providing. And so they're very happy to pick up these online initiatives that we have done. In fact, our own, I mean, as I would say, I mean, an indication of the acceptability of our quality is that our own institutes, which are considered the high end of education in India, also accept the online version of the courses that we are offering using our own faculty only. So we are doing that. And so many of the students at IIT Madras can take for credit transfer courses on the online medium. The industry has been interested. So a lot of job interviews and so on, they are now beginning to recognize that having these kinds of packages from the online medium is very useful. So we find a lot of our students who have completed these courses have very nice experiences in their interview processes. and they write to us about it. I will also say there is a challenge because now that the online mode is open, a lot of people are offering something online. So it is very important to for both, especially for the student community, to understand what is the depth of the content that's being offered, what is the quality of the assessment that's happening. And so that remains a challenge, and we are trying to set some standards within the country so that it is I mean, what we have embarked on remains a good path. It's easy to do something at large scale that fizzles out, and then we will never be able to go down that path. So we have tried very, on the one side, we are trying to be very conservative about what we're doing so that we don't do something that backfires. But at the same time, we are doing, we are venturing into completely new territory. And I do think a lot of the players involved are happy with it. So this is where I think things stand in India right now.
Okay, thank you. Professor Mokbel, would you like to have a second round of comments, maybe also on the role play among the actors or whatever follow-up you want to have?
No, just a few comments or two on the fact that as Professor Kate and Professor Patab has said, if you have online courses for upskilling and reskilling, so it means that upskilling and reskilling are global, are not necessarily national or depending on one system. So to think the way a system or a set of university would offer a course or a short program in this direction has to take into account the global nature or the global feature of the subject, because workers or employees might go and take the courses from any country, from India, from the States, from Sweden, wherever, from Spain. So this is an open and global system, regulated sometimes by law, saying that this percentage of courses can be taken online. So this has to be taken into consideration, and so there should be a network, and as it probably has been said at the beginning, a way that we can cooperate globally in this domain. This is one. And my second comment regarding competencies, which I do agree that people need to do something at the end of a certain course, and that is at the present time of value, not has an old value actually. But if we consider this point, we also need to consider other challenges related to the human knowledge. We cannot only have skills of doing something. We need in higher education something that is really rigorous in terms of science, especially in nowadays. I am also from artificial intelligence and machine learning and things like that. So especially in our days, there is blurring boundaries between disciplines. There are blurring boundaries between memory and intelligence. We are more and more data-centric. So where we can hold the human knowledge outside the university. So all these together need to be thinking in globally between academicians and the actors of the learning and skilling, and in order to be beneficial and to be resilient to the changes occurring very fast. Thank you. Sorry. Okay.
No, thank you very much. So I assume now, according to our program, there is a chance to put questions through the QA chat service, and this suppose it's monitored by Marina. Are you monitoring this? Who are monitoring this?
What do you need right now, Callie? Yes, sure.
Yeah, so everybody in the audience can put questions through the QA system.
That is right.
And Marina is like more monitoring this, I hope.
Yes, we have Nico in the backstage doing that for us.
Okay, Nico, are you?
Yes.
Hello, everybody. We still do not have many questions on the Q&A, so I suggest, Kale, that you keep the discussion, and maybe that will kick some questions and comment from the audience. Well, I invite everybody to use the Q&A to post questions, specific or general questions to the panelists, and after the second round that Kale will launch now, we will do again the same process, and me or Marina will post it. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you. We have 2 remaining themes, so I guess we continue and come back to the QA session after that. So I guess now to all the panelists, I guess we take the same round as we started for simplicity. So I think the second, the following theme is to look into which thing I raised, the obstacles for the universities. So, I mean, I took up a few examples where the problems could lie if we want to engage. So maybe if you could comment on that from your perspective, that we assume that now that universities want to engage, but the question is then what system changes do we need to anticipate happening at universities in order to do so in a sustainable way? I mean, you can always do one little effort and then some other, but we like to see that we are more continuously engaged. And the question is, what does it take for our universities as you see them today? So please, Kate, you'd like to start?
Yes, it's a great question. Thank you. And I say this as a former professor myself, that I would say the major change that needs to occur in the US context is shifting from the professor as the center of the universe to seeing the student as the main actor, right, who has many different ways to learn, one of which is learning from and with faculty or experts, but many other ways, including learning by doing, learning by reflecting on doing, right, experiential learning, these kinds of short courses, work experience, and so forth. So right now, the idea, at least in the US, of the student is that she is essentially passive, right? She receives information, knowledge, right, to Professor Mokbel's point, and then kind of spits it back to show that they've actually digested it. This is part of why I would say that the US is not producing, by and large, graduates who are really ready for the workplace, because they're very passive. What they know how to do is to take exams, but by and large, that's not work that most people do for a living, right? So I think we have to shift the essential model. I think we have to think about different ways of learning. And I'm fascinated to learn more about how AI can fit into this. I just want to say one thing, that the knowledge issue is very important here, because seeing knowledge and the development of knowledge and the communication of knowledge as the main job of the university is part of why I think there's a disconnect between what employers need and what universities do. We know that knowledge is constantly changing, right? I mean, and there are things that computers are better at than we are, namely remembering things, data, certain kinds of things, but there are things that humans are uniquely qualified to do. And so there's increasing interest in what you might call future proofing, right? So really thinking about both the interplay between humans and technology, and also those qualities which are sort of innately human, right? That have to do with communication, interpersonal skills, cultural competencies, teamwork, and so on. So that I would say is kind of the major issue from our point of view.
A follow-up, I mean, given these changes that you think need to happen, if you look at the very complex system you envisioned about US, I mean, from the Ivy League universities to whatever players there are, is there a difference in conservatism or being more innovative? I mean, can you see, is it a general phenomena, or can you see some pattern of change across all these various actors?
Yeah, I would say that, what we think of as the US university, which is really, as I mentioned, a tiny piece of the entire picture. They don't really have to be innovative because if you're Harvard or you're MIT or you're wherever, right? So actually most of the innovation is happening kind of a few rungs below because those are universities, first of all, that, or colleges that are really in a very competitive position in terms of, it's the reverse of the IIT, right? That they really need students. And so they are actually doing very interesting things. And I helped start I designed a college called College for America, forgive the name, but entirely competency-based that was part of Southern New Hampshire University, which I personally had never heard of before I started working there. But it was able to create this new thing because it didn't have a brand that it had to protect, essentially. And that model, which was competency-based, is, among other things, being used in many refugee camps across the, actually including in Lebanon and different parts of Africa, other parts of the Middle East, precisely because it's flexible, it's online, and so forth. So it is interesting. I think that's often true, right? That innovation comes from those who really need to find a way to distinguish themselves.
Okay, thank you. So maybe Pratap, you can comment. I mean, maybe you can comment also a little wider about India, because obviously IIT Madras is pretty proactive in many things. So maybe not only IIT Madras, but maybe if you can also comment how you see the other actors developing or changing in the same fashion that we heard from the US or not. Yeah.
So actually, so this is a very interesting point on how people are adapting and what they are trying to do. Again, one of the issues is the regulatory framework within which they operate. So the government has enabled multiple institutes to offer online education. So more universities and colleges are at least looking at getting into this arena. I would also say that in our experience, when we work with colleges, one of the things that we have tried to be very careful about, and so we have always thought of mechanisms to handle it, is the threat perception. So many times we do have college teachers asking us that if the IITs are giving everything for free and it's online and everything is available, then what will happen to us? Will we lose our jobs? What will happen to our livelihood? So we have always built mechanisms in this process which keeps them very much in the loop, which keeps them as an active player in the loop, which uses this to provide them with flexibility, but not something that is intended as a replacement, so to speak. I mean, we help them direct their students to take advanced electives with us, for which they may not have the faculty. And so we work with the university heads to highlight that to them, that there are various regions where you have these high-end electives which you will not have, you will not immediately be able to find faculty. So we suggest that you focus on that. We also have mechanisms by which the college faculty will also be part of this process, where they have a login on our portal, and they get to see how their students are performing, assuming that the student has given them the consent to look at that data. And so they get to see what's happening. They get to assist the student if there is an issue that maybe they're not submitting their assignments or some such thing. So they get to participate. So this way, this is a challenge. It's I guess a social challenge that we have to work with. So we try to keep everybody in the loop. We also see this challenge of what is happening from the student perspective. So although we started this, I mean, we've started an online degree recently. One of the things that we have been very conscious of, at least particularly in the Indian scenario, is that traditionally the students getting into college are all straight coming off of high school. Unlike, let's say, at least in the US, I find whenever you go to a class, you are likely to see a very diverse audience sitting in the chairs in the classroom, significantly older than you, maybe come back from a job after several years at a job. In India, in most colleges, you won't see this. You will see a very homogeneous mix of students who are all in that 18 to 23 age group, completing their education and moving on. So we had this challenge that when we do something online, we don't want them to miss this human interaction because it becomes easy. They will just think that we can do this online, and many parents may just pick that route and say, okay, now you try this online, and they, at a very crucial stage of their development, they will miss the human interaction perspective. So we have been particular that we have actually said that they have to be enrolled in a physical college in any degree that they wish somewhere else, and do this online degree as an add-on. So we have actually scheduled our courses and the way it plays out across the year, so that they can manage an in-person degree in addition to an online degree. And they can actually get in multiple ways. This works out for us because they actually get to be a specialist in some area with an additional knowledge from this online degree. The colleges are happy because they know that they have not lost students to us in any manner. They in fact, they can even advertise saying that you come study in my college, you can also get an additional degree from IIT Madras. So that kind of a combination they can offer. And for the students, it's a very positive thing because they get to see the human interaction of life in their formative years, while also accessing high-end education without having to focus so much on this entrance examination and how to get into this institute and so on. So these kinds of challenges we have had, and these are some of the approaches we have taken.
Thank you. Professor Mokbel, you mentioned all the very autonomous Lebanese universities. Obviously, they can decide. So what is your picture, how the attitude in average on these matters? I mean, is it a small subset who want to go in this? Are many conservative? I mean, how does it look attitude-wise among the autonomous universities?
Professor Kali, as I said, and probably you have said, and the colleagues have said also, it is a moment of change, of transition. But it happened that also it comes in Lebanon, where we are facing a huge crisis, a very big one. And today we are in survival mode. So I can talk about a year ago or 2 years ago, but today we are losing the best colleagues, the best professors. They are leaving the country. So we are in different setting. But a year or 2 years ago, we were really in discussion, in-depth discussion about how to reskill ourselves, to adapt our curricula in order to our graduate, but also to the previous graduate, to the a little bit older between double quotes graduates, to remain competitive. And how can we support this? And I think one advantage of the pandemic is that now online is really we have, let me say it this way, we have upskilled ourselves in this domain. We were never used to give courses online. It has been an experience. We learn, we taught ourselves to use this mode of delivery, and this gives us means for communication. And I believe that this change will remain even after the pandemic. We are now used to teach online, to prepare course online, to communicate, to meet online like we are doing today. And this is a very important thing. And I believe that we are aware, I think like Arnaud has presented, that mixing technologies and upskilling will yield much higher result, much more performance. And hopefully we can do that. But today I cannot say, because Lebanon is really in a very deep crisis. So how can we proceed from this? It can be an option for us, because what we are looking after, at least from academic, I think, or I would like to believe, is to reestablish our connections and to reconnect. But we'll see how things will improve. At least it will not be fast, but we have learned things in the past 2 years. We have a lot of habits have changed, and this is I think it is positive. because when you deliver the same course or similar courses in different mode, you get different perspective. And when you add a perspective, it's always very enriching. And I think we will not lose this. It has this positive side, I think. Yeah, this is what I wanted to say. Yeah.
Thank you. So I think, thank you very much. So the remaining theme I have here on my list is regarding the value of international collaboration in this area. I mean, we are two small countries, my own small country, and maybe Lebanon is not such a big country. So we are two, and then we are two big countries, US and India here. And of course, for small countries, I think it's kind of obvious. I think for Sweden, it's absolutely super important to have international in all fields, in all aspects. But maybe it's not, I mean, it can be another attitude in a bigger country, obviously. So I like you all to comment on this, this balance between solving the internal problems in the local setting and this internal collaboration and the value of that. Please, Kate.
Well, I'm very excited by that vision. I think, you know, as across the globe, we're forced to upskill, as you wonderfully put it, Professor Luckville. And, you know, the US is just emerging from a period of, I would say, enforced isolation, right? I think there's now increasing interest in recognizing that all around the world, not only are we interdependent, but there are some things people do better than we do, some things that we do better than they do, and that it is sort of silly in a way, if you think about it from an economic point of view, for everybody to be doing the same thing all by themselves in their own countries, when there are not only economies of scale, but you know, perspectives engendered by scale. So we, as I've mentioned, we do, my consulting firm does work with, we've done some work actually in Denmark, not in Sweden, and in Canada, and I've in the past worked with a program in Rwanda. And I think that this is so important, especially for Americans who are stupid about the world and have been, you know, by and large, sort of that's been reinforced, you know, that we don't somehow have to care about the world. And I think it's finally dawning on us, if only because of viruses, that, you know, we don't have actual walls, that it's permeable, and that permeability is one of the most exciting things that's possible right now. So I'm very interested in thinking more about this.
Yeah, thank
Doing
you.
more about this. Yes.
Thank you. Pratap, what's your opinion? You live in a subcontinent.
So yes, Callie, it's a very, I think, a very pertinent point in this context about how we can, what is the international angle of view on this whole, you know, process. So let me just say from the perspective of what we are doing, although I spoke to you and mentioned what we are doing in the Indian context, actually what we are doing is open for the world to utilize as the same way the students in India do. We already have some number of international students picking up our courses across the world. For various reasons, we offer courses which are core engineering courses, where you know, it is difficult to find such a course anywhere internationally on an online mode. So for example, if you were looking for something in, say, vibrations, impact of vibrations on underwater structures or some such thing, I mean, so we from, you know, oil rigs take this course because they have not found it anywhere else. So we are actually very open to having this utilized by students across the world, anywhere, including, for example, in Lebanon, if they are having difficulty accessing good courses, they are most welcome to check our courses. We will run exams in Lebanon in person that they will have to take to complete the process. We have students in the US take our courses. We have not advertised commercially because we are not operating commercially. but we are reaching out to various institutes, both for offering our courses and also for inviting faculty with specializations in their respective domains to offer courses through us. Our model is very different from commercial models which operate because we work mostly on a not-for-profit basis. So the course is free, completely free for a student anywhere in the world to take. We only charge the sort of the actuals for running the exam, for taking their exam. So our fee here, for example, is typically of the order of $15 for a course. That's it. The entire course, a semester course you would take and write the exam and get the evaluation done and get a certificate from us, which is verifiable, is of the order of $15. And that's because the government supports it. The government, but it's not I mean, it's not really a loss for the government. They're very even from the government side. It's not just from the IIT side that I say that it is open for the world to use. Even from the government side, the government is just delighted to offer our human resource specialization as something that's available for the world to use. We have had students in Ghana take our course in significant numbers. And now a lot of people in, even in the Indian subcontinent, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka. I mean, we may have political differences, but we do have students in Pakistan and Bangladesh, and we are very happy to interact with them. They're very happy to interact with us. And we feel this is a great opportunity for faculty to access students both in India and across the world whom they would otherwise not be able to access, and similarly for students, large number of students to access faculty whom otherwise they would never have the opportunity to meet or access in any other form. And we have a lot of mechanisms in place, and we have already deployed it, so we have a lot of confidence that we know how to do it, and we know how to what kind of issues crop up in various locations, and therefore a reasonable bouquet of solutions that we have with which we can handle most local peculiarities. So this is our situation.
Thank you. So Professor Mokbel, final comment on this matter.
Yeah, well, all has been said, but I would like to repeat what Dr. Kate and probably a little bit Dr. Pratap has said at the beginning. Well, in a previous question, every student is evaluated by her or himself, and every learner, in fact. And although we are small countries, but when it is about learning, learning is something very personal and very precious. And even a learner has her or his own value, and a learner is always a good learner is always surprising the mentor or the instructor. So I am all for international cooperation, and I think that in learning we should be international. This is not questionable, but we need to find ways so as to put more and more values in this learning, joint efforts in order to be even better. And this is not very easy because learning is also contextual. It's also about the way human being perceives things. But I'm sure that with the communications mean that we have today, thanks to the giant of the communication, but they have put tools that we can meet without physical displacement. I think that we are obliged to go to international. And what we have heard today, at least what I have heard from the colleagues and from you, Professor Kali, show that we are, the community is smart enough to build a good thing. So this is what I wanted to say. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. So actually, it seems, Nico, you had some questions in the end.
We do have some questions from Latin America and from Africa. So this is truly a global dialogue, and we are very pleased to say that. I would like to start with a first question that comes from South Africa. The main concerns in our audience are with the methods, the how we do all of this in the practice, in our practices. So first question comes from South Africa. Digitalization of higher education has forced learners in South Africa, and I would add all around the world, to be more independent in their teaching and learning. Moving online occurred due to COVID-19. So what approaches can academics use to ensure that students develop critical thinking and independence in their degree programs?
Anybody in the panel, please, who want to? Kate.
Yeah, I love this question. So I think that one of the most useful things that has happened through this forced reskilling is that people are discovering both technology and sort of internal resources that they didn't have before. I think the whole question of how students develop these absolutely critical interpersonal, personal, soft skills, whatever you call them, really has to be by changing the model, as I've said before, and online or even hybrid, right? There's increasing interest in hybrid as not just a hybrid class, but thinking of the fact that we all live hybrid lives these days, right? We might shop online, but then we go to the corner store, we're using WhatsApp, and then we're talking to a human face-to-face, right? It's really only in higher ed that we say there's online and then there's face-to-face, and that's the good model. So I think there's increasing interest in thinking about what is best done place-based or time fixed, right, at a certain time or certain place, and what can be done with an app on your phone, that can be done with a computer, that can be done through a community event, and so on. Just really expanding the notion of learning beyond the classroom. And I think that that's one of the things that's so critical. I also just think the context here is important, that not only do we live in a sort of permeable world, but every multinational company, right, requires that people be able to work with each other, not necessarily just together, right, but with diverse teams across the globe and so on. So these are critical competencies that students really need as part of their personal portfolio moving out into the world.
Thank you. How is it with the questions? Maybe we take another one.
Okay, all right. So we have a question coming from Brazil that says, Latin America is just moving into virtual mobility integrated to credit recognition, both within the region and bilaterally with the US and European universities. Up north, you mentioned different initiatives. What can be done to speed up mobility south-north? And let us not forget universities in the African continent. And the same person says, actually, Arno Weiss mentioned the presence of Latin American participants in his program in Barcelona, in his online program. Are there other good examples?
Please, anybody want to comment on this? No, anybody in the panel who want to go into this question?
Well, I can say, okay. So since it is virtual mobility, I think the barriers are less than in physical mobility in going from south to north, and probably vice versa also, why not? I don't feel that barriers are as before. We have heard Professor Pratap saying that there are online courses, not very expensive. I think the key issue in today is the motivation. How to keep motivation of the learners. Because in the learning, and I would like also to touch a little bit on the previous question, learning by doing is naturally here present in online, because there is a machine, we interact with the machine, we interact with the tools, and we do things like this. And of course, some category of topics, of programs, of courses do not fit well with online. And they might need to have more cooperation and more mobility and more physical mobility sometimes. Yes, this is an important question, but I do not have an answer for that. But whatever is online, I think it has been made easier, I think, for mobility. But for example, if we need skills, manual skills in some topics, of course we do have video and we can play with that. But it is still something questionable. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Professor McBell. And we have one last question for the panel. Again, on how to do things, how to do this, how to make this happen. How to handle the practical classes or laboratory classes, practical tests or practical teaching in virtual learning platforms. How would you suggest we do that?
Can I take that, Kale?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, so I think that's a very great question, and this is a challenge that a lot of people who are trying to do things in the online mode have to address at some level. So in fact, incidentally, I mean, in India, for example, we have particularly because of this reason, we have a Supreme Court ruling that we cannot offer a technical degree, so an engineering degree, completely in the online mode, because students have to have something hands-on. And if you just say it's completely online, then that may not be possible as of today. So, so that's just to give you some context of the kind of issues we face. What we have done is, in fact, which we find quite interesting is, so if let's say there's a chemistry course, an advanced chemistry course. So what we do is we invite the faculty offering that course to tell us how many students he or she can actually host during the summer break. For say a 2-week daily lab kind of an activity. So let's say they offer, and usually they've given us numbers like 20 to 40 or some such thing. And then, so what we do is in the online course, we let the students know that, say the top 20 students in that course or top 40 students in the course can visit this university and get this 2-week training. And this is in person, and we give them a separate certification for it. We in fact also, again, based on whatever finance we have and some sponsors we get, we cover their stay, and they travel to that university and stay at that university is covered. And they are able to actually have practical classes. They find this very useful, very interesting, and also it brings a collection of students who are highly motivated in that specific subject area, which is actually very valuable, and they're also fresh off of a theory course which they have done well in. So it's not like all the students in the class have to by force take that lab class, and you will have, say, I don't know, 30% of them not interested in it and or not as well capable of handling it. This is a highly motivated set of students who have done well in a national level or in a course, a very specific course, which they took of their own free accord. Nobody asked them to take it as part of the curriculum necessarily. And so when they come to the lab, they are very well motivated. The faculty who hosts them is very thrilled about the whole experience. The students are also thrilled about the experience. So I think this gives us some ways of doing this in a hybrid mode. Again, can't be expanded to the entire student body, but it is better than not having it.
Thank you. Yeah, I may comment also. I think, as you know, the whole world is thrown into distance education. I mean, in Sweden, all universities started from zero, and in 1 month, everything was on a distance. So I think, but because of the situation now, there has not been time for much discussion about the effect of all these things that happened in the last year. So, but I foresee that this discussion will come, because in the post-pandemic world, there will be a choice between how much online and not you should continue to have. And then those discussions, I think, will come up very clearly. And I'm surprised, actually, personally, that it seems to have worked at all with this short notice, that everybody was thrown into a different mode. I mean, of course, I think there are evidence coming up now in our country that it was very, very difficult for high school students, for example, to work on a distance. And it's quite clear that the learning outcome has not been what it should be in many cases. So, but there is no consistent discussion and analysis of this yet, but we will see it soon, I will say. Okay, so if there are no more questions, I just like to sum this up. I believe we first of all, I hope you can all agree that this has been a very interactive and engaged discussion, which I think is a super important part of it all. I think it's also shown that there are differences, interesting differences, but there are also a lot of equalities, or invariance across the world in certain aspects, even if a country is small or big or anything. There are a lot to learn. Maybe I will tell you a little anecdote, because I've been part of several of these European projects. Europe has the habit of having capacity building projects, where European universities engaged in projects and are supposed to transfer capacity or competence building to an overseas country. And in our case, it happened to be India. But in many of these cases where we, the Europeans, were supposed to transfer the capacity, it turned out many cases it was the opposite. What we found, that many things we found in the Indian context was much more advanced than we had in Europe. So you never know when you collaborate whether you find something more advanced than yourself, I mean, or of interest for your own improvement. So I think this is an important lesson that at least I have learned. So I like to thank you all for engaged in this. Maybe there will be coming events where we go more into practical matters, because we had many questions here about how to realize all this nice thinking in practice. So maybe there could become upcoming events where we focus more on those practical matters than more of the intentions that we discussed today. So thank you all so much. And I give the word back by that to Marina.
Thank you, Kalle. Thank you, Dr. Kalle, very much. Before closing this webinar, we would like to announce that all the webinars in the series of Overall Global in Focus 2021 will be available, the recording, I mean, in our website and in the Vimeo channel. You will be sent an email to announce this, and it will be posted on Twitter also shortly. So we will keep you posted on that. We would like to thank all our panelists for their generosity today, our partner institutions for their support, and our faithful audience for joining us always in our initiatives. And just quick reminders to close this seminar. Again, registration is open for the 2021 Virtual Annual Conference on Internationalization of Higher Education, organized by Symbiosis International University and the Association of Indian Universities, in collaboration with the World Bank and Overall Global. You can find all the information regarding this conference in their website that is accessible from the Overall Global in Focus website. We have a series of webinars, Overall Global in Focus 2021 ahead, upcoming, so we are building together the current and future agenda of higher education in a global context, and you're most welcome to join us in this adventure. See you soon, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.